The nature of conflict has changed in recent years. It's now less between states, but rather inside states. The classical form of state-to-state mediation is now being replaced by mediations which have to involve many so-called non-state actors. And this has made the business of diplomacy and peacemaking rather more complicated. All too often, people whose interests are most at stake in an international discussion of an issue are the last people to be consulted.
Independent Diplomat, a group of former diplomats and policy experts, is working to address that problem.
The mission of Independent Diplomat is to help marginalized groups and countries be part of that discussion and to get their needs across effectively. In a sense, we're gamekeepers turned poachers because we are giving the knowledge of how diplomacy really works to people who are excluded from that magic inner circle about how to get into it, how to break it.
Independent Diplomat's clients have included South Sudan, Kosovo, Moldova, Croatia, Somaliland, and the Marshall Islands, a nation surrounded by the Pacific whose very survival is threatened by climate change.
The Marshall Islands suffers from the impacts of climate change more than other states. It is the canary in the coal mine.
Climate change means everything to the Marshall Islands, to our very survival.
At Independent Diplomat, we help the Marshall Islands to raise its voice internationally at the UN climate change conferences and other related negotiations.
They have really built bridges with other nations and government that can help showcase the Marshall Island plea for, attention to our climate change issues.
State-based diplomacy remains a very closed system, and it's very difficult for outsiders to know what is going on. And that's partly why Independent Diplomat exists, to be a kind of guide, a navigator through that unnecessarily opaque and difficult system.
I'm getting comfortable in that, I can now speak about climate change and they know that I'm from the Marshall Islands. And that's through the help of the Independent Diplomats.
But to fulfill that promise, the North and South...
Independent Diplomat also helped South Sudan get its voice heard at a critical juncture in its history. A civil war between South and North had raged for decades in Sudan. Government forces had repeatedly attacked and destroyed villages throughout the South, displacing millions.
As crazy as it sounds, the United Nations was going to be convening a meeting about the possible independence of South Sudan without inviting a Southern Sudanese representative.
This is a country that was just beginning, that did not have even what you would call established diplomacy. And there was quite a vacuum. I think that vacuum was very well filled by independent diplomats.
Though South Sudan had no official state recognition, Independent Diplomat convinced the Security Council to break with precedent and invite South Sudan's Minister for Peace, Pagan Amum, to speak.
I am particularly grateful to you, Mr. President, for inviting me to this meeting. Your chairmanship of this council today, like the fact of the meeting, sends a very strong signal of support for the full implementation of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, for the referenda to be conducted on time, and above all, for peace to be maintained.
Here he was, for the first time ever, expressing the needs of his country, South Sudan, in a formal diplomatic meeting, and a meeting, no less, that was actually going to decide the future of his country.
Without Independent Diplomat, I don't think there's any way that Pagan Amum would have been in that room making that speech.
The Security Council decided the referendum should go ahead, which enabled South Sudan to win its independence peacefully.
If the Southerners had not been able to get what they wanted through diplomacy, they probably would have gone back to war at some point, and that would have been disastrous for them and for everyone else. It doesn't take a lot of people to make a big difference. You can help others to achieve an outcome almost against the odds.
They don't follow the established patterns of what diplomats are supposed to be. It's quite innovative.
I don't claim that Independent Diplomat got the referendum and we got South Sudan its independence. South Sudan had some extraordinary powerful allies, including the United States, but we did things for South Sudan that nobody else could do, which was help them express their own needs in their own way, diplomatically. That is the measure of our success. It's not actually ending wars or solving climate change. It is helping our clients be more effective. That's, it's a humble thing, but it's something we can realistically and materially do.